What's up, y'all? Welcome to Tabletop Bros. Today we're going to be recapping my recent performance in a local small grand tournament. As always, my faction is Space Marines and my chapter is Deathwatch. The local grand tournament was 4 games over a single day, right here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Hosted at our local shop, The Game Bunker, for the Nerd Bar Summer Brawl. My Deathwatch army started off as an escalation league, 250 points over 8 weeks until we got a full 2,000 points ready for Warhammer 40k. And part of the reason I chose Deathwatch is because they're the statistically worst ranked faction in 40k 10th edition, and I just love a challenge. So I ended up winning my first 3 games and then losing in the finals to one of my teammates, who just so happens to be the #1 ranked Gene Stealer Cult player in the world. I scored 100 points in my first game, 98 points in my second game, 72 points in my third game, and then 88 points in my fourth game, and finished with a record of 3-1 and got second place. My total battle points were 358 out of a perfect 400. My win SOS was 2.63, and my battle point SOS was 77.25. With the launch of the new missions and season, based on people's opinions and then also the statistics so far, typically games have been lower scoring, but I think as people get more used to the changes in the actual missions themselves, as well as shifting around the army composition, for the most part, I think we'll find that overall the scoring is pretty much the same. There are a couple of missions that were removed where previously you could score 8 points, one by taking your opponent's home objective, and the second one by completing an action in the table corners. Some of the other missions have been shifted around so you only score 4 points, or in some cases similar missions where you could score 6. We have the addition of the secret missions, which allow you to recoup 20 battle points for your primary objective at the end of the game by completing a single mission. Some additional changes to battle line units that make them a little more substantial, but I think in the end we'll find, for the most part, games are still going to be relatively high scoring, probably less of a gap between the winners and losers, but I'm sure we'll still see some blowouts. And overall, I think that battle line is less impactful, or Games Workshop led us to believe, and also that more realistically than not, secret missions are not going to win you the game. Now, of course, there's going to be some outlier situations where this isn't the case, but I think in general, over time, these takes will be reflected in the statistics. So that being said, let's jump right in and take a look at my Deathwatch list. So as always, I'm running Space Marines, Deathwatch, and using the Blackspear Detachment. I started off with the Gravis Captain, with the Pwr Fist and Relic Chainsword, as well as the Thief of Secrets Enhancement. Next, we have another Gravis Captain for 120 points. He's got a Pwr Fist and then a second Relic Pwr Fist, and he's carrying the Tome of Ectoclades Enhancement. And this was my warlord. Then I have 5 Deathwatch Veterans for 100 points. And as always, I'm rocking them with 2 Infernus Heavy Bolters, 2 Deathwatch Thunderhammers, and 1 Xenophase Blade and Shield. Next is one of my favorite units, 10 Hellblasters with Plasma Incinerators. And then we see the changes in my list as I have dropped my 2 Gladiator Lancers and replaced them with 2 Predator Destructors. Each of those costs 130 points, armed with the Predator Autocannon as its main turret gun, and then 2 Lascannon Sponsons, equipped with a Storm Bolter and single-shot Hunter-Killer Missile on each. Overall, I found that these hit just as hard against big vehicles as the Lancers does. A little bit less consistent, but with Oath of Moment and then Big Oath from the Tome of Ectoclades, I can get those rerolls to hit or wounds when I need them. The additional shot from the Hunter-Killer Missile once per game gives me the opportunity to get 3 big shots in instead of just 2 with the Lancers. And then also the addition of the Predator Autocannons adds a lot of 3 damage firepower, which is extremely good against infantry as it gains the additional AP. So suddenly those -1 AP 3 damage shots turn to -2 AP, and you'll see that I have another buff in the army to up the AP additionally. Next, we have my assassins. I have the Calidus Assassin for 100 points for up-down shenanigans. I have the Eversur Assassin for a quick-moving action monkey and throwaway unit, and then we get into the thick boys. I've got 2 Indomitor kill teams armed exactly the same way for 270 points. Each one is composed of 5 heavy intercessors, 3 with heavy bolt rifles, 2 with heavy bolters, and then we have 2 aggressors with the auto Boltstorm Gauntlets and Fragstorm grenade launchers, good for volume of shots and clearing away chaff. And then I have 2 Inceptors in each squad with the Plasma Exterminators, nice 3 damage shots for picking up things like Terminators or hurting stuff with damage reduction. And then finally, each squad has an Eradicator with Multi-Melta for that heavy punching firepower. And if you're not aware, the Indomitor kill teams have the similar rule to the Sisters of Battle. Once a single model is destroyed, the entire unit gets +1 to hit, and once the unit is below 50% strength, which means I've lost 6 guys because of the attached captains, all of their weapons gain +1 to wound. So as the squad gets hurt, the damage output actually goes up. And then we have one of my most recent additions, 10 Terminators. Now I'm running the 10 standard Terminators with Storm Bolters and Chain Fists, and then I also have 2 Cyclone missile launchers in the unit. I've opted not to use the Deathwatch Terminators because honestly they're just overcosted for the extra heavy weapons, and while I've considered using the Terminator Assault Squads for the extra wound from the Storm Shields and the Dev wounds from the Thunderhammers, I found that many units or armies that you want to kill have Dev wound protection, so it's less impactful than it used to be. And while the 4th wound is nice, especially because there's so much damage 3 output in the game right now, the additional points for the Terminator Assault Squad and lack of shooting makes them a little more one-dimensional and just not worth the sacrifice. I absolutely love the Deathwatch bolter strats on the Terminators. If you're shooting at your oath target, you're hitting on 2s with 40 storm bolter shots inside a rapid fire range, and you can use a strat on the squad to give them either an extra AP, so suddenly the storm bolters are more impactful to things like Space Marines, or you also have the option against heavy infantry to give them the Hellfire shells, which means you can wound infantry or monsters on a 2-up or 5-up respectively. And then finally, the chain fists are pretty good in combat as they add in some extra vehicle busting power. Normally vehicles that you'd be wounding on 5-ups, because you have anti-vehicle 3-up, you're wounding on 3s instead. Now unfortunately the chain fists hit on 4s instead of 3s, but again, if you're going up against your oath target, you get +1 to hit. The 2 Cyclone missile launchers are pretty nice with a combined 4 shots. The crack missiles are pretty decent, but to tell you the truth, the frag are actually really nice as well, as they have blast and 2d6 shots each, which means on average against a 20-man unit, you're getting about 18 shots just from the Cyclone missile launchers. When you couple that with rapid fire from the actual storm bolters, you're dishing out 58 shots against cheap chaff units. The addition of the free rapid ingress with the teleport homer lets you put them in position without costing you a command point, and then using the Deathwatch teleport strat along with the bolter strats lets me put them exactly where I need them, move them around throughout the game, and mitigate some of their otherwise slow movement. The final unit I used was my first time testing it out. I took a Storm Speeder Hail Strike, and while they're not particularly popular in the meta, it has around 20 shots with no AP and can do a little bit of damage to cheap chaff, but more importantly, it has a bonus rule that after this unit has shot, you can select one of the units that was hit by one of its weapons and give all future shots during that shooting phase an additional 1 AP. So you can't select vehicles or monsters, but this works particularly well against infantry. So when I combine this with the Predator Destructors against infantry targets, the autocannons get an additional 1 AP from the Predator's special rule, and then an additional 1 AP from the Hail Strike. So basically, inside a rapid fire range of 24 inches, each of the Predators is shooting off 6 shots at strength 9, 3 AP with 3 damage. Perfect for killing things like Terminators or Gravis Marines. The Hail Strike is also really nice because it allows you to stack buffs with your bolter strats, which can't be stacked together. So in this case, I could take the Hellfire rounds for anti-infantry 2-up and still give my Terminators an extra 1 AP, meaning that they're going to be dropping quite a few Space Marines. I can alternatively take the Kraken rounds, increasing my rapid fire range to 18 inches and giving them -2 AP. And overall, I found that without your opponent dedicating decent tank busting firepower into the Storm Speeder, it's surprisingly durable with toughness 9 and 11 wounds. It has a move of 14 inches, which means I can get it into table quarters if I need for scoring. I can get it into position to line up a shot for the extra AP buff, or I can move it somewhere I need to claim an objective with 3 OC or do an action. So that is my list, and obviously it performed pretty well because I went 3-1. So my first matchup was against Orcs. I've got a decent amount of experience playing against them. He had a couple of big vehicle units, including the Stampa, and with a combination of the Predators, Big Oath from the Tome of Ectoclades, and just the overall massive volume of firepower, as well as the Terminators in close combat, I was able to drop those vehicles fairly easy and run away with the game, scoring a perfect 100 points. My next game was against Necrons. My opponent won the first turn, stayed pretty well hidden, so on my turn I did almost nothing, and then on his second turn he teleported the Monolith very close to my front lines in order to kill my Predator and my Eversur Assassin. He dropped out a unit of Immortals, and on my second turn I dropped down the Terminators to have line of sight on everything. I picked up the Hellblasters at the end of his turn and put them back down in that area as well, and then I shifted my focus with the 2 Indomitor kill teams and just unloaded on that side of the board, completely avoiding the Nightbringer and basically destroying the Monolith, 2 characters, and his Immortal unit on the second turn, and my opponent was on the back foot after that. I was able to run away with the score and finish the game with 98 points. My third game was against Thousand Suns. It's only my second game that I've played against Thousand Suns, but it was overall a cookie cutter list. Once again, I ran up one of the Predators and sort of baited him out. When he moved out the Mutileth Vortex Beast and a unit of Thousand Suns with Ahriman to destroy them, I shifted my firepower to that side of the board and cleaned up the threat. I like the idea of using the Predators as a little bit more of a throwaway unit at 130 points, as opposed to the Lancers, which I'm relying on for like my hard-hitting firepower. They're still durable, they have good OC, and they're pretty fast. The Hellblasters performed pretty well as I positioned them so they could get off some shots. Magnus ended up killing the squad. They shot on death and killed Arman and his unit. And in all of my games, I used the teleport strat quite a bit to reposition and get where I needed to be. Magnus ended up exposing himself to get onto a point to try to take it from my Gravis Marines. And between my massive amount of firepower and then combined combat, I was able to take him down even with the -1 damage. And as you know, if you played Thousand Suns before, once they lose a couple of their key characters, in particular Magnus, their Cabal points drop off pretty quick and they lose a lot of their overall power and abilities. So it had already been a long day, 3 games deep, and I went up against my teammate, who just so happens to be the #1 ranked Genestealer Cults player in the world. He was using an interesting new list with the codex that came out, running 3 full-size bike squads with quads, and honestly, I was shocked by the amount of mortal wounds he could dish out. He positioned his 2 Genestealer squads right up on my line, 9 inches away. He got the first turn and move blocked with one of them, charged into my Gravis Marines with the second. I had a very defensive deployment with my Terminators, blocking my main force so that he could only charge into them, and then my Gravis Marines positioned on the other side. I ended up taking out most of the Genestealers in combat, but didn't finish them off until my turn. He took some really early board control with all of his bikes, and I moved up one of my Gravis units into the center. I fell a little short with the killing. I had a couple of units out of position because of his aggressive deployment, and then on his turn, he was able to use his maximum bike units to do something like 15 or 16 mortal wounds. He had an overwhelming amount of firepower and all but cleaned up one of the Gravis units. The Genestealer cults get to recycle their units on a dice roll, and one of the Genestealers came back, and throughout the game, he just kept getting his units back. It ended up being a really close game as I was able to score 88 points, but I think he had something like 97. There was a couple of opportunities that I had where I could have actually won. I'm starting to get a little bit more familiar with which of the secondary objectives I should be throwing away, as a couple of them just aren't realistic to obtain, and it gives your opponent too much of an opportunity to stop you. I also forgot a couple of my rules as it's been a long day, made a couple of mistakes, but overall the game was a ton of fun. But the truth is, there's a reason he's the best Genestealer cult player in the world. So I was super happy with my results overall. Getting second place in a small GT was really nice. Playing 4 games in one day was definitely a lot, but I was happy with my battle points in each game. I was happy with how the actual army performed, and I think aside from a couple of minor changes, after trying out quite a few units in the Deathwatch list, I can honestly say that I think I found the sweet spot. I really like the Terminators. They are super durable. Most people can kill like 3 or 4 Terminators fairly easy, but when you take a block of 10 of them, suddenly they just become very, very durable. And I like the idea of the big units rather than smaller units, and then just having some smaller characters or individual models to do like actions or score points. The Predators were overall a pretty nice replacement for the Gladiator Lancers. The Lancers have performed extremely well throughout the league and then in tournaments previously, but I have to say the limited amount of firepower that they can dish out is definitely a limiting factor. And they cost 160 points each. The Predators are 130 and felt much more like I could throw them away if I needed to or move them out onto objectives. They're still almost as durable, but the 2 shots from the las cannons are almost as good as the actual Lancer laser destroyer, and then the addition of the autocannon shots, 4 at range or 6 up close, as well as the one-shot hunter killer missile, means that when you need them to go Nova, especially with like the Deathwatch faction rules, whether it's sustained hits, lethal hits, or the big oath term with full rerolls to hit and wound, I was very happy with the Predators and definitely enjoyed the extra 60 points that I freed up by taking 2 of them instead of the Lancers. The Assassins performed nicely as always, scoring me lots of points and doing the stuff. And in addition to the Terminators, adding in a second block of the Indomitor kill team meant that I have 30 different models with 3 wounds apiece. I have 2 captains, 1 attached to each of those squads. They can slap in combat and protect my relics, so I make sure to get the use out of them before they die. And then of course the Hellblasters did what Hellblasters do and made sure to kill stuff on their turn, kill stuff on Overwatch, and then kill stuff when they die as well. The Storm Speeder was pretty nice also. I had considered taking one of the other Storm Speeders because they have a little bit better shooting. I like the idea of getting +1 to wound against monsters or vehicles, but the difference in points between the Hail Strike at 130 and the other 2 at 150 or 160 just really felt like less is more. Also, we have like a pretty heavy infantry meta right now with Blood Angels, Adeptus Custodes, Thousand Suns, and lots of other stuff, just bringing lots of warm bodies, tons of Space Marines, Chaos, and Horde armies like Orcs and Genestealer cults. I really feel like the extra 1 AP against everything but vehicles and monsters was pretty nice, especially when combined with the Deathwatch strats. So overall, really happy with the performance of the Deathwatch. Working on some more tweaks as I'm considering dropping the actual Deathwatch veteran kill team. Unfortunately, they did get the recent points decrease, and since then, I've all but eliminated them from my list. The Watchmaster also got a points decrease, and people are saying that his aura ability is actually better than it used to be, but to tell you the truth, I just don't think that's the case. He can only attach to units with 2 wounds apiece, and they pretty much die easily with everything doing damage too. So I'm thinking about going more towards like the Imperial Chaff, freeing up that extra 50 points, and then possibly putting in like a couple of full boss lieutenants to just deep strike in and do actions or be in position. I think it's really important in this edition, especially with the new Pariah Nexus mission deck, to have at least like 10 to 12 different units. After you've attached your characters, you need to have a lot of game pieces that you can just do stuff with, as a lot of the missions require actions. I haven't found in general that actually having battle line is that substantial, and I think the way that the meta is going, less people are taking those like big durable vehicles, with things like Ironstorm getting nerfed. And right now, the majority of the factions that you're facing up against that are doing extremely well, things like World Eaters, or in this case, Genestealer Cult, have just a ton of bodies. And I'd much rather be able to take down infantry or MEQs than worry about being able to get a single vehicle off the board. And to tell you the truth, with the Predators and the combined fire from everything else, especially the Hellblasters, I just didn't really have any issues with it. So just kind of wrapping up, 4 games in one day is definitely a lot. It was a long day, and obviously there was a ton going on Saturday, but I'm very happy with the overall performance of the Deathwatch. I love the changes that I made, and I don't think I'll ever find the perfect list, but the pursuit continues. And I know there's been a lot of rumors lately about the Deathwatch getting rolled into Agents of the Imperium or their codex going away, but the truth is, until something actually happens, and even once it does, if it's still an option, I'm going to be playing Deathwatch. And regardless of where they place in the overall faction rankings, it has absolutely no bearing on how much fun I have with them, and obviously, with enough experience and lots of practice, you can definitely win games with them. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the tournament wrap recap for the Nerd Bar Summer Brawl, and if you did enjoy today's video, hopefully by now Tabletop Bros has earned your subscription. I'm going to be going to another RTT in a couple of weeks, so if you want to see how I do in that one, make sure to stay tuned, as we'll have a recap coming after that one as well. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. Absolutely love interacting with the community. But in the meantime, that's it from the Tabletop Bros. Later!